Now here's an ancient DOS game series virtually everyone's heard of, Commander Keen: Invasion of the Vortigaunts. This 3-game trilogy is famous for being the first fully tile-mapped platformer with pixel-smooth scrolling on a PC, since most PC platformers up to this point either had only single screens, had you travel between single screens by crossing the edges, or had some kind of gimmick going on that allowed for smooth scrolling by sacrificing the frame rate, visual fidelity, or both. Beyond the technical mastery, these games feature very simple gameplay that still holds up today, and while there are some annoyances that come up with all 3 of them, especially Episode 3, for the most part, they're pretty solid. So let's get into the game stats. Commander Keen was technically developed by id Software and published by ADG in 1990. And I say technically because even though it was made by the same guys who founded id Software, they were still working at soft disk publishing at the time. Yet this was not a soft disk sanctioned product, as it was made outside of company time with the intent to be sold outside of the company's structure. Might seem a little deceptive, but then when you really think about it, how is this situation any different from the countless game programmers who started out writing code in their basements late at night while working for some other company during the day? Besides, if you look into the history of soft disk and id Software, you'll probably side with id. In any case, these games are one-player platformers featuring EGA 320 by 216 color graphics and PC speaker sound. As for the current release date, the games are still shareware and really easy to get. Now, while the first episode, Marooned on Mars, has always been free, you'd have to buy the later 2 episodes, The Earth Explodes and Keen Must Die. Now, there's a couple ways you can go about getting these games. You can either buy the first 3 episodes from the 3D Realms website at www.3drealms.com for $6, or you can buy the entire Commander Keen series on Steam for $5 at www.steampowered.com. Yeah, I think it goes without saying which is the better deal. The story revolves around 8-year-old boy genius Billy Blaze, who built a spaceship out of old parts lying around the house and cruises the galaxy under the guise of Commander Keen. Well, at least when his parents aren't home. The first game, Marooned on Mars, involves Keen exploring the surface of Mars, only to return to his ship and discover several vital parts have been stolen. Thus, Keen must travel to various Martian cities and recover these parts so he can get back to Earth. On his way back, however, he discovers a Vorticon mothership stationed not too far away from Earth, getting ready to pulverize it, thus leading into the second game, The Earth Explodes, where Keen must board the Vorticon mothership and destroy all of the weapons aimed at our planet. Following this defeat, the Vorticons return to their homeworld to tell the grand intellect of Keen's exploits. But Keen's on the offensive now as he finds and jumps through the hyperspace gate the Vorticons used to reach Earth with plans to find the grand intellect and put him out of commission. Which is what you do in the third game, Keen Must Die. One thing I like right away about these 3 games is that they all look different. One common complaint I have regarding stuff released by ADG is that when you buy one of their full games, you're not really buying more content, just more levels. Now, this doesn't apply to all of their stuff though, and Commander Keen is one of those exceptions. Now true, the second and third Commander Keen games do play exactly the same as the first one, but both have entirely different graphics, a handful of unique mechanics compared to the others, new kinds of enemies to face, even though there's not really that many kinds of enemies to begin with, and of course, plenty of new levels. In terms of actually playing these games, they're not exactly like your typical platformers, and there's a number of things you gotta get used to right off the bat. The most important of those things being jumping. The jumping mechanics in this game are a bit tricky to get used to, since they're incredibly floaty and very delayed compared to jumping in most platformers, but they're also very precise and respond to every tiny adjustment you make from pressing and releasing the movement controls. Plus, they're tuned to the size of the blocks very well. This makes the jumping controls very difficult and tricky to get used to, but once you've finally adapted to them, you'll rarely end up getting killed because you screwed up a jump. Unless you're using the pogo stick. And the pogo stick is an item you find very early on in the first game and is a staple of every Commander Keen game following. The idea is that by using the pogo stick, you can jump twice as high as normal, but you retain your inertia when you let go of the controls. Now don't get me wrong, the pogo stick's a fun thing to use, but it takes quite a lot of practice to get used to using this thing, and even after it becomes second nature, you'll still find yourself making mistakes with it every so often. Once you've got the jumping and pogo stick controls down though, it really just comes down to finding your way through each of the levels. You access each level from an overhead map, and while some levels may block your progress, other levels are just in the middle of nowhere and may be optional. It really depends on if a mission goal can be found in the level or not. In the first game, you need to find all your spaceship parts, and in the second, you need to destroy all the Tantalus ray machines. The third game ends with a boss battle instead. In fact, it's the only boss battle in the entire trilogy, come to think of it. Now, beyond jumping around and using your pogo stick, you also have the ability to shoot, and while your weapon of choice changes across all 3 games, they all do essentially the same thing, shooting a burst of energy that can harm anything not made of metal. Yeah, your weapons are useless against robots, so don't even try. Not to mention, you can only fire your gun a limited number of times, so you'll want to be conservative about frying enemies until you can get a healthy stock of ammo going. As for firing the gun, well, now we need to talk about the controls. You have 7 keys to worry about while playing these games. 4 movement keys, a jump button, a pogo/use button, and a button to bring up your status. Note the lack of a gun button. You fire your gun by pressing both the jump and pogo buttons at the same time. This takes some getting used to, just like the jumping and pogo mechanics, and more often than you might expect, you'll find yourself shooting your gun when you meant to do a huge pogo jump from a standstill. I'm almost certain the controls were worked out this way so that they would work with a joystick, since PC joysticks up to this point in time rarely supported more than 2 buttons, but even the developers make mention that the joystick controls are difficult to get used to, so why they worried so much about joystick support at all is beyond me. Something you may have noticed by now, for all the things this game does that's fun, it tends to do something to counteract that. Well, take dying for instance. Commander Keen is a one-hit kill game. You take 1 hit from anything that can kill you and you die, forcing you to restart an entire level, even if you're right in front of the exit. To counteract this, it's incredibly easy to get extra lives, as you get one for every 20,000 points, which is not a hard number to reach. Using the scoring items from the first game as an example, 20,000 points is equal to 200 lollipops, which are found everywhere, 100 cans of soda pop, which are pretty common as well, 40 slices of pizza, which are fairly common but don't show up in large quantities, 20 books, which are a little tricky to find, and teddy bears, which you only need to find 4 of to reach 20,000 points, and there's usually more than 1 of these in each level. Yeah, getting points in these games is not hard. Not to mention if you do die in a level and go back in, all the items reset, so if the level has a cache of guns or teddy bears or something, you can easily rack up ammunition and lives by playing the level, getting killed, playing it again, getting killed again, and repeating as much as you want. And yes, the extra lives counter does keep going past the maximum amount of keens it will show. Now, I gotta be honest here. I like the first Commander Keen game because there's lots of interesting platforming that never gets too difficult but isn't too easy either, and I like the second Commander Keen game because you can easily rack up lots of firepower and get to shoot lots of stuff in the process. However, the third Commander Keen game is sadistic. I mean, seriously, some of the levels are tailor-made to kill you by using the game's own idiosyncrasies against you. Now, that's something I'd expect out of a ROM hack, not an unmodified game, and it's part of the reason why I don't like the third episode. The other reasons why I don't like the third episode are because of the teleporters and the lack of guns. Specifically, to get around everywhere, you have to use these teleporters on the main map, but they don't link back and forth like you would expect, so actually going where you want to go requires a bit of guesswork once you've got access to more than just a few of these things. And as for the lack of guns, while most of the levels have enough guns in them to keep you stocked, some of the levels are severely lacking in ammo compared to what you're expected to go through. Plus there's one particular section in one of the early levels that's specifically designed to waste all of your ammo. So if you go to several other parts of the game first, then visit this level not knowing about this ammo wasting section, you're going to be so low on ammo afterwards that the rest of the game will feel impossible. So yeah, the first episode is fun, the second episode is fun, but the third episode is elitist, which means if you don't have these games mastered, you're probably not going to survive it. Still, every episode has a bunch of unique or interesting things, and neither game overstays its welcome as the levels in them aren't really that huge, so getting through them really is just a matter of patience and experience, as opposed to memorization, which you would need if the levels were any bigger. Overall, the Commander Keen games are a fun time and simple to play, but they will take a lot of practice before you'll be able to really get anywhere in them. Also, before I talk DOSBox settings, I should quickly mention that there's a modern port of these games called Commander Genius, previously known as Clone Keen Plus, and while this port has a lot of features the original DOS games don't, it can be really tricky getting its settings tweaked for optimal performance. So really, unless you like tweaking lots of settings, it's probably just easier to stick with the DOS games for one simple reason. Yeah, as far as DOSBox settings are concerned, Commander Keen works with just about any of them, so just leave cycle set to auto and you're good to go. Even the joystick support works without any extra configuration, though I do recommend sticking with the keyboard because of how precise you need to be with some of your jumping. Anywho, that's all for episode 95 of Ancient DOS Games. Next week's a filler, and I'm going to be taking a quick look at 3 different DOS games that I don't intend to do full reviews of since, well, they're not ancient. Stay tuned for next Saturday, you'll see what I mean.